Rachel Reeves is under attack from business and investors after weeks of budget chaos, with Brits bracing for a host of tax hikes next week. Investors have slammed the Chancellor for repeated mistakes, sucking the life out of the economy, making even steeper tax rises likely as the economy falters. Justin Urquhart-Stewart has branded the Chancellor's purported moves to raid savers, penalise pensioners, slap taxes on property owners and add VAT to everyday items as illogical and extremely unfair.
This important interruption is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Protect your money and your identity. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code here to get ExpressVPN right now and save up to 73% on annual plans today. Right, let's get back into it.
As US stocks wobble and fears mount of a US recession, how will an already battered Britain fare? Justin says he has no confidence in Rachel Reeves' ability to weather any economic storm. Here's our conversation. So Justin, thank you for joining me again. We left our last conversation on the government seeming to not have many ideas other than to increase tax to just keep the structure of the British state the same. Do you think that that's a sign of Rachel Reeves not really having a strategy here?
I think you're absolutely right. To actually run a country, you do need a strategy. To run a business, you need a strategy. And that strategy is important because it's not just so you know what you're doing. It's so actually that the audience knows what's going on. The people who work for you know what's going on. If they don't have a clear idea of what the plan is and where we're trying to get to by when, then it's hardly surprising people are going to lose trust in you. So you need to have something which is clear, straightforward and simple for us all to understand, the same message.
And so what you've seen so far from the Chancellor and Labour, do you think that on our current path we're going to be able to fix the mess we're in?
The only consistent thing I've seen from her appears to be her trouser suit, which doesn't seem to change over the past few months. I'm probably being rather rude about that and very unfair. I don't see a consistent message of what we're trying to get to. And every time I think, maybe we are trying to see something now, as we've seen over the past few months with what might be happening in the budget, lo and behold, 2 weeks later, it changes again. Mm-hmm. So there's no consistency. The only consistency is the inconsistency. And that, I'm afraid, is reflected not just in terms of voters and in terms of the population, it's reflected in the international markets. They're reflected in the bond market. Our debt cost has gone up. Not totally because of her, but certainly part of it is because of her and her policy and how it's been interpreted.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that, we've got some comments. I've got some comments here for you from some influential people in the finance world. So Andy Haldane, who was an ex-Bank of England rate setter, he has accused Reeves of repeated mistakes around this budget and said that the way that she has briefed the media and then constantly backtracked has sucked all life from the economy. We've got Jonathan Oppenheimer from Anglo American who said the UK is uninvestable. And we've got the CEO of Signia, which is a financial services company, who said the UK is becoming a scary country which she wouldn't touch with a barge pole. Do you agree with this sentiment?
I think it's a bit unfair on barge poles, but apart from anything else, some of it's pretty extreme. Is Britain uninvestable? No, it's not. Britain is perfectly investable. Mind you, we could easily fulfil that wish if we want to go down that particular route. Mr. Oppenheimer is again going too far. But Andy Haldane had a lot of time for him, and what he is quite rightly highlighting is there hasn't been a clear policy giving confidence to people, whether as a citizen, a taxpayer, an investor domestically or externally. And if you lose that and don't give people that confidence, we're seeing now the result of it. So what your commentators are saying there, I wouldn't agree with wholly, but if we don't do anything, we could easily end up in that position.
Could you paint a picture for someone at home who maybe hasn't run a business before or isn't big on investment of what the rhetoric that we've had from the last month or so, or even the last few months leading up to the budget, how, if you were thinking of making an investment in growing your company or investing in Britain, and then you hear everything that goes on, how would the typical business person react to that?
Let me put it back then, I suppose, in my own world, when I was dealing with my team in our business, which we ran. And I'm pleased to say it was run successfully, down to them primarily rather than me. But I had to stand up in front of them and say, this is what we're going to be doing, this is how we're going to do it, and this is what we're going to achieve and what we're hopefully going to get out of it. And we're going to be measured not just by our profit, but by our clients and by the competitors and things like that. So it gives them confidence to know what we're doing, and we're all going to be, I say that old phrase, in it together. That may also mean, and I had to go through this as well, bad news. Sometimes the market goes down in whatever you're selling, and therefore you're not selling much, you're not making money, maybe you're losing money. How do you get out of it? So maybe you have to take pay cuts, maybe you have to actually... These are bad messages to put across, but they've been done in a way which is constructive and give people confidence, say, okay, but we'll get the end of it, and we'll get maybe, get some payback at the end of that. So it takes, I think, some, not clever, but intelligent communication to get sometimes difficult messages across. If you have not been in business and faced shareholders, staff, competitors, more to the point, your clients, and be able to pass on not just good news, but also sometimes rather bad news, you have to have that experience to know how to get it across, to convince people and not tell people actually you're just sort of bullshitting your way through it. It actually is credible. So even in this situation, we find ourselves with today, Britain isn't broken. Britain is damaged. We've still got successes, but you wouldn't know about it from what we're being told. Our leaders at the moment are being inconsistent, and as you've been highlighting, that over the past few months, the Chancellor's been saying one thing, and then a few weeks later, changing it again. So if you go a bit further forward, then back and forward, it's hardly surprising when people say, thank you, Britain, well done, but actually I'm going to invest over there because I know what they're doing. I'm just not quite sure what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to get at here, is that if you are someone who was thinking about expanding your business, a lot of good business leaders will want to keep their company lean and ready to react to whatever comes its way. So if all you're hearing is potential tax increases, which, they're coming from all over the spectrum, are you more or less likely to make that plunge, make that investment, expand your team? Or are you more likely to, if you were thinking of letting someone go, letting them go now?
Yeah. If I don't know, I cannot see with some reasonable judgment as to what's going to be happening over the next few months, and none of us have the gift of foresight. But we can take a view as to what it's going to be like, what may go right, what may go wrong. More to the point, what are the surprises? Because there will be surprises don't know about. So supposing there is a sudden recession, supposing there is another war breaking out, what do you do? And at least you can actually give people the idea that you don't have the answer to everything, but you've thought about it and said, we've actually put in place ideas to actually make sure we've got reserves of this or plans for that. You need to give people clear confidence as to what's going to be happening next. And the longer you leave the country without a budget, which tells people saying, this is how we're going to balance the books, they're bad at the moment, it'll take several years to sort out, and this is the progress we've made. Tell them the progress you've made and what the next stage is going to be. That's the way you do that. Now, it's not going to happen in one budget. It takes months and years to be able to achieve this. Confidence, I'm afraid, is the hard won, but easily lost.
So if we go into some of the ideas that are being floated now about the budget, I mean, who knows by the time this interview comes out whether they'll still be talked about. If you tell me whether you think they're good or bad and why, and what the larger effect on the economy might be.
Yep.
So there's been a lot of talk about cutting VAT exemptions. Now, included in VAT exemptions are food and clothes, but the Chancellor has said that she wants to focus with this budget on bringing down the cost of living. Would cutting VAT exemptions do that?
The cutting VAT exemptions actually, again, can lead yourself up a really complicated path. We had the issue only a few years back of the pasty tax, where George Osborne got himself into all sorts of confusion as to whether a pasty was a cooked item or an uncooked item, does it qualify for tax or not? And well, it adds confusion, and the message is therefore confused, and so you lose the benefit. It's too complicated. And does it really actually achieve what you want? And the answer is, well, not with enough scale. These minor taxes in comparison, when you're fiddling with VAT around the edges, they're a bit like some of the sin taxes on tobacco and alcohol and things like that. All things that we like to hear about in the budget, or don't like to hear about, but we expect to hear about that. But they have minor impacts. There are only 3 areas. And the 3 areas which, of course, Labour put in their manifesto they wouldn't touch was going to be income tax, national insurance and VAT. And once you've actually crossed yourself out of that, then you've left yourself very little room indeed, which is why we started to think, well, you're going to have to break your manifesto, and maybe you have the courage of doing so, because it's simple, straightforward, and give you enough money to be able to go out and say, right, we're going to raise this money now, and I don't have to come back next year for the same thing.
But slapping VAT on food, that's the opposite of bringing down the cost of living, isn't it?
It is going completely the other way around, particularly for those people who are trying to help. If you're doing a low income, what are you going to hit? You're actually going to say the cost of basic food. I've got to live, and you put the cost up for living. It's about as sensible as saying we want more people to be employed, so we're going to put an employment tax on, which of course we saw with national insurance. So it's the sheer illogicality of this. Think it through, not from trying to be a clever politician or a special advisor to one of the ministers, but actually thinking from the point of view of an individual citizen saying, this is what we're trying to deal with at the moment, it's complicated enough, is that going to benefit me or not?
One that I'd be interested to talk to you about, because whenever we speak, normally you're quite keen on trying to get the property market moving. There's been a lot of conversation about bringing in property taxes, maybe to replace council tax or to replace stamp duty. What effect do you think that would have on the housing market?
Could be very careful with property tax, because property is pretty close to almost a holy writ for most people in this country. What's your primary asset? My property. Don't touch that. But of course, actually, we've had property tax in this country. We've had council tax and we had the rates and other elements of it. And it's very out of date and it needs reforming. That's not to say you necessarily have to put it all up. It needs updating to actually try and make sure there is a fairer property tax overall. Now, put that on one side, because that needs something to be reformed in the future. Shorter term, if you actually just start putting a wealth tax on property overall, you'll distort immediately then the property market in terms of purchases and sales. As soon as you start doing that, you see less purchases and sales. If you see less purchases and sales, you'll see less further sales or further developments going on in terms of developing the house, rebuilding, rewiring, all those elements. So you bring in your other people to come and do it. Who will be spending money? Who will be paying tax and earning money? So don't interfere with that, because what you'll do is actually end up as a brake on the economy, when actually what you want to try and do is encouraging more into the economy, which is why then the Tory idea, well, it's not their idea, proposal was going to be get rid of stamp duty altogether, actually holds a lot of sense. Some people say we can't afford to do it. Stamp duty is one of those multipliers. That if you actually then reduce stamp duty, more people will buy and sell houses. If you buy and sell houses, the kitchen goes, the bathroom goes, and you actually do the redevelopment. It gets more money going through the economy. More money going through the economy means more taxation because of VAT, because things are being bought and sold, and therefore actually it achieves what the Chancellor actually wants to have: more vibrance in the economy, more income coming in.
And in another conversation which is coming about is maybe them cutting the ISA allowance. So at the moment you can save up to 20,000 tax free a year in an ISA. There's potential of dropping it to 10k. What's the effect of that?
Every time you're online, your money and your identity are at risk. Scams now make up nearly 40% of all crime in the UK. That's thousands of attacks every single day. In Britain, someone has their identity stolen every 2 minutes, leaving victims with wrecked finances and years of stress. The threat is real, and you could be next. ExpressVPN is your shield against criminals. It locks down your devices, hiding your personal information and financial details from hackers, scammers, and anyone else looking to exploit you. So whether you're checking your bank, shopping, or just browsing, ExpressVPN makes you invisible to prying eyes trying to steal your money and your identity. ExpressVPN shields your data with military-grade AES 256 encryption. That's the same standard trusted by the US government to guard classified information. This is the highest level of online security you can get. So don't wait for disaster. Secure up to 14 devices at once and get powerful password protection. Real support is available 24/7 because cybercrime never sleeps. Save up to 73% on annual plans today. Every moment you hesitate is another moment you're exposed. Protect your money and protect your identity. Get ExpressVPN right now.
One of the things you want to try and do in this country is encourage people to save for the future. Why? Because in the future you want them to look after themselves, not fall back on the state. Why? Because the state hasn't got any money. And so you encourage more people to do so. Now, one of the things that was being talked about is, well, maybe it's not into ISAs, into cash, maybe they should be investing in stocks and shares, which I think is a perfectly good idea, but we don't teach people about investing. And so you're encouraging people, therefore, to invest in something quite often they don't understand about. And I can see some bad behaving investment people encouraging you into fantastic funds, which will give you an excellent return, in something you don't understand and too much risk. Or do you divert it into UK investments? Well, that's possible. But again, that takes some work to actually set up mechanisms for that to occur. That's quite possible if you were to do that on a regional basis, maybe through the mayoralties of, as we've got with Birmingham, we've got with Manchester, to actually encourage regional investment in companies there, and therefore creating almost regional ISAs. It's not something you could introduce overnight, but it's something they should seriously consider. Don't actually cut savings, encourage people to save for the future, but maybe encourage them to save for the future into something which is going to be better than just cash. And after all, because cash, when you look at the rate of inflation and what you're getting on your deposit accounts at the moment, you're still losing money.
While we're on the subject of savings,
Yes.
I think pensioners in this country are feeling a little bit beaten up, or people even saving towards a pension. There's talk of reducing the salary sacrifice tax relief for higher rate taxpayers on their pension savings. There's also talk of cutting the 25% tax-free lump sum. What effect is that going to have on the economy in terms of the money that pensioners will have to spend when they have that big bonus when they come out of work, but also on people saving for pensions? We know that the current way we've set up our state pension is unaffordable. People saving now don't have defined benefit pensions to fall back on. So we know we've got a bit of a savings crisis when it comes to pensions. Is this going to just further disincentivize people from making those savings?
And life has been extremely unfair for pensioners when you're looking at actually people trying to adjust the changes of how they're being run. Think about it. As a pensioner, 40, 50 years ago, you were chipping into your pension. You knew what the pension rules were going to be, when you were going to retire, and how it was going to be structured. Over that time, the pension rules have changed on a regular basis. Nothing as they were before, sometimes for good reason, because they wouldn't necessarily be affordable. But really, frustration now, when you have retired and you're now going to take your lump sum out, because that's what I planned to do maybe 10, 15 years ago, and now some politicians said, no, that's no longer fair, we're going to change the rules. I saved my pension money according to those rules, and now you've cheated and changed those rules. That's not fair. Now, you may say that, right, in the future, we're going to have to adjust all that. That's fine. Give people to adjust for the future. But merely to shut off a benefit which you have saved up for because you were told that was the right thing to do, that's, in any other case, frankly, you'd end up with a court of law if you were doing it in the private world. But obviously that won't happen here. No, so we've got to make sure that pensions are seen to be fair. Pensioners have, with the triple lock, had some benefit. The triple lock will eventually go, but it'll have to be adjusted slowly, not wiped out completely. But to actually disincentivize people from having a pension is thoroughly stupid. Because unless you actually encourage people to have a pension to look after themselves in the future, you're going to fall back on the state, and lo and behold, the state doesn't have the ability to provide that support for you. And that goes back to that other problem. Because we don't teach people about finance and pensions, how much money do you need in your pension? No one tells you that until you've retired, which is a wee bit late. And so actually make sure this is something which is part of the educational system, and also not just as you as our generation, but across the family. Because one of the issues often here, particularly in the southeast, but also across the country, how are my children going to own a property? The answer is, well, realistically and individually, it's going to be quite difficult. But the family can, with money across the generation, coordinating it to the individual to be able to help it. That's what you're going to have to have more help with. So rather than looking at just the pension today and individual issues you can try and change the taxation on, take a longer term view. So it's fairer for the pensioner and the family to adjust their finances and investment accordingly, and also then actually fairer for the government, because they then have a better idea of actually how they construct models to look after the population and encourage them to make sure they're having the right level of savings.
It just seems as though, I mean, we talked a little bit about her strategy here. There was talk a long time ago, or not even that long ago, that she was going to emulate the success that Australia had with the super funds. But it seems like actually no, these potential changes would actually disincentivize savings. Also, this salary sacrifice cut would be for higher rate taxpayers, though on current path we're going to have 10 million higher rate taxpayers. This isn't just high earners, is it, that will be affected by this?
Yeah, higher rate taxpayers, and when we had the changes to the really radical changes brought in by Lawson all those decades ago, and it really was quite remarkable when we suddenly had a higher rate tax level of 40 or 45,000, and that was a reasonable salary in those days. Now it's not, so forget higher rate taxpayers. These are just taxpayers, albeit at a slightly higher level than some. So yes, it's seen as being unfair and not constructive. Again, it's after the event. Tell people in advance what you want them to try and do, but merely try and actually slash various benefits when people have designed their savings and pensions for this is unfair. Now, change the rules, by all means, but give me notice for it so I can adjust for it. Don't change the rules in retrospect so that actually you're just going to take more money off me for the plan I made according to what the politicians of the day told me to do. I played fair, you didn't.
Back to property. She's mulling over whether she wants to slap NI on landlords.
I find it astonishing. The very term landlord, somehow you get pictures of the Sheriff of Nottingham turning up or something like that. It's a landlord, they're evil people. But of course, actually, most landlords are people who've actually saved up some money, got a flat, got a house, with extra money, they can rent it out and get some income out of it. And it's been tightened up a lot more, quite right in certain areas, to make sure that tenants have their rights there, particularly in terms of quality of housing and things like that. But to penalise people more and more for it, actually just will actually pull that market apart. Realistically, and I found it was an argument I used to have with people over the past 10 years, most people didn't make money out of the rent of being a landlord. It was actually the value of the property going up. The rent sort of washed its face, but not a lot else. Actually, if property prices aren't going up, in fact they're going the other way, there's very little incentive for landlords to do it. In fact, they'll back off. What's going to happen then? So actually you'll probably see property prices fall even more, and you'll find lack of property, available property for people who need renting ability, so they can't afford to buy, to be able to go into. So again, this is just knee-jerk reaction without thinking about what's the knock-on effect from it. Think again, a plan how you adjust this. How would you adjust it? Well, you've got big landlords like people like Lloyd's Bank who've gone into renting now, and it's long-term view in terms of then they sector the market they can work into. So work with them to say how can we adjust the rental market to make sure that people can, not only just tenants can benefit, but landlords have a fair cut of it as well, and not just see themselves as evil idiots waiting to be attacked by Robin Hood.
We talked a little bit in our past videos about inheritance tax. It's back on the agenda again, not so much farmers this time. Apparently, Rachel Reeves wants to implement a lifetime gift cap instead of hiking the amounts. So what would the effect of that be? And how do you think Brits would react to what many see as quite an unfair tax?
At the moment, we have various issues over a gift you can actually give so much away every year, up to relatively small sums. Over the years, you can do it. But people also have to be very careful, because the best will in the world, giving your property or whatever it is to your children, how many cases do you come across where suddenly the parents actually, could we have that money back please? Or, excuse me, I'm still living in this house, don't take it away from me. Be very careful when you start doing that. What you want to be able to do, again, is money is transferred from one generation to the next in a way which actually preserves and helps wealth in terms of wealth protection for the families to make sure the next generation can benefit from it. Yes, there's going to be inheritance tax. There are going to be tweaks around the edge about the amount you can give away. You've still got the 7-year rule if you can give it away. But again, that's unnecessarily complicated. You can simplify this really to make it a clearer, simpler mechanism. But also, take a longer term view of inheritance tax. It doesn't actually bring in much money. What you want to be able to do is people to actually earn money, save money, have wealth, and be able to pass it on. And there will be an element which across the generation there will be a tax on that. But what you don't want to do is actually then have a disincentive, say, well, it's pointless actually having this money because I can't give it to anybody, so I won't bother to earn it anymore. I'll just go out and spend it now and don't worry about the future. That, again, is not stupid. Think about the future. Governments are not supposed to be running today and tomorrow's economy. They're running setting the economy for 10, 20 years ahead.
Earlier in our conversation, you said actually there's still many reasons to invest in Britain, but the way we're going, you're getting rid of them minute by minute. One thing that's been touted the whole way through, which really could come in, is what's being dubbed an exit tax of up to 20% on the assets left in the UK of someone who has fled for Dubai or somewhere with pastures greener. How dangerous is a tax like that?
It's when taxation turns from actually contributing to the national coffers, to the general fund of everybody, into something which is just penalising people because somehow they think you're breaking the rules and therefore we're going to have a go at you.
But it brings up, does it not bring up kind of thoughts of like capital controls?
Yeah.
And for a country like ours, which is very dependent on having an open economy with free inflows and outflows of capital, I just want to get across to our viewers, like, how big is the risk of bringing in a tax like that to our economic model?
Let me take you back many decades ago, sadly, when I remember going on one of my first skiing holidays as a tiresome child, and I was allowed to be able to take £25 out to go to the continent. That was all my foreign exchange I was allowed to have. It was supposed to cover me for 2 weeks. Well, of course it didn't. And I've still actually got the old paperwork you had to fill in order to take your £25 out. And it went up from 25 to 50 and it grew a bit. And then one day, then quite rightly, someone said, we're going to do away with this altogether. You can actually take your money and go where you like. Bring it in and come out again. Everyone said, oh God, everyone's going to fill up their suitcases and go off to the Channel Islands or wherever. They didn't. And actually what happened was we ended up with more money coming in. If you start hinting at the fact that there's going to be some form of capital control, and particularly you think this person's unfair because he's left the country, but he or she has left behind this, so we'll take that lump sum they've left there, then that's just seen as just being bitchy about the whole thing and not actually thinking about the logic of what you want. Britain has really benefited from being an open economy. You come in here, invest. If you're successful, you want to take some back in, you can do, because you're welcome to come back again in the future. You succeed like that. As soon as you start putting in that little tincture of somehow that it's unfair and we're just going to have a go at you because you've been rich and you've done successfully and I'm not, then actually it taints the whole taste of things. Whereas actually what you do is you want to encourage people to come in and actually do the right thing, create businesses, create wealth for themselves and for the company and for the employees and for the country. That's positive, and if at the end of it they go because they're allowed to do so, that's fine, because they've done their contribution. If it's all about people breaking the rules, then that's a different issue altogether. But no, encourage people to come in, and possibly the most dangerous thing I've seen over the past year with this government, with Rachel from accounts, is actually discouraging people from investing in this country, both domestically, but more to the point, internationally. We used to be one of the world's largest, after America, beneficiaries of foreign direct investment. Why? Because they could. And they trusted us. You know, we're a fair country. We have never reneged on our debt. One or two examples where we have, but no. But we're seen as being trustworthy. And now we've actually got that tincture of cynicism now coming in. And as soon as you do that, people will go elsewhere. So we're already seeing the foreign levels of direct investment dropping off. And if you haven't got people investing it, who else is going to be doing it? Well, Britain ourselves can be doing it, yes, but we've already shown that they're not doing enough of it into the right places. So again, you're actually making life more difficult for yourself. So Rachel needs to go back and sit there and think, how can we encourage investment, encourage people to come in and pay their fair due, pay their taxation, make sure it's fair enough, because you actually can create more taxation from creating wealth. What you don't do is create wealth from more taxation.
If we move away from the budget, a big story this week has been wobbles on the US stock market to do with what some fear is an AI tech bubble. What's your understanding of what's going on and how exposed is Britain?
If you look around the world and what's happened with the stock markets over the past few years, it is really quite astonishing. If you put down the list of things which are risks, which you would sit there and suck through your teeth and say, I'm not going to go anywhere in the market because of war in Ukraine, the behaviour of Russia, behaviour of China, what's happening in the Middle East, your views on President Trump, whatever it may be. All sorts of elements like that, all sorts of issues which you sit there and say, on that basis, I'm not going to invest because it frightens the bejesus out of me. Yet, you look what's happened in the markets, they've gone up. You've actually seen money trying to find a home, sometimes into riskier markets, even investing into things which most people don't understand, like cryptocurrencies and things like that. So is there going to be another fallback, crash or explosion at some stage, financial issue? The answer is yes, there will be. How bad will it be? We have no idea. We've had them before, and actually what happens, things do bounce back. If you think that it's going to be the end of the world, then it's a different matter altogether. Go and get a couple of cases of scotch and sit in a cave in Wales. And you don't need to worry about the future. But for most people, yes, there's going to be volatility. Are there fashion fads? Yes, there are. Is AI a fashion fad? Most people probably, and certainly in the investment world, probably couldn't even spell it, let alone understand it. Have some of the valuations gone too far? Yes. Which ones? I don't know offhand. But will there be a pullback? And the answer is yes, there will be. So if you think something has gone too far, then you can sell out of it and come back. For most of us as investors, we're not trading every single day, so you won't be doing it. But if you've got a broad enough spread over everything from AI, fashionable stocks, to extremely dull mining shares or something like that, then actually you're going to be okay. There'll be winners and losers the entire time. 3 or 4 years ago, you'd say, don't invest in the UK stock market. It's a very international market. It's not going anywhere. Invest in America. That would have done well. This past 18 months, the other thing has gone the other way around. America hasn't crashed, but those other markets have now caught up. So if you'd followed the fashion fad, you'd end up losing money probably on it. So yes, be wary. Will there be a knock-on effect? Let's assume there is an AI bubble and it does go bang. Does it affect? The answer is yes, it does. Why? Because the valuations of those companies will have affected investors and pensioners, shareholders around the world. It'll knock on to related companies, or the supplying companies, or the companies using those products. So that knock-on effect. It'll have a knock-on effect in terms of confidence for investors as well. People will go, I'm not investing anymore, I'll just shut up shop for the time being, or I'll even sell everything else. So you've got to be very careful with these things. When we went through the banking crisis, the Americans acted swiftly to try and make sure that they realised what had gone wrong and to be able to affect it. In that case, they had to go back to some of those banks and make sure there's enough support, and the banks that should be supported, to actually get the economy moving again. In their case, getting mortgage markets moving again, people buying and selling houses, with everything goes. And within 18 months, the economy had started picking up again, and people were looking back at that moment of madness. Are we going to have another moment of madness? Yes. What do we do to try and prepare for it? The answer is actually have people who are sitting there saying the level of risk is coming up. As an investor, you start pulling things away from which is too risky, and just be a bit more conservative at the time. You can always go back to it again. Trying to guess this year's fashion fad is very difficult, but I'm afraid all of us, including me, invested in fashion fads which have turned out to be next year's tank top. I've got a fine collection of tank tops.
So if this is a bubble that's about to burst and the US goes into recession, the US is in a situation where it's probably well placed. I mean, it's the world's reserve currency, most powerful country in the world. Donald Trump has already got stimulus coming with his tax cuts that are coming in next year. He's talking about a $2,000 check to every family in the US, which he's calling a tariff dividend. So they're able to make a stimulus if one comes. Now we look at Britain. We're about to tighten with this incoming budget. There's also, as we've talked about a lot here, not a lot of confidence in Britain at the moment. If a recession comes, how much worse will it be for Britain than the US in our current way that we're standing?
If you look at it purely mathematically, we've got a president there who has got supreme chutzpah. He's able to come up with ideas and bits of financial chicanery which sound great. Are they affordable? America's debt is huge and getting much, much larger. So you can't actually afford those sort of things. But where, of course, he is actually being correct in doing so, sometimes not always the right reason, is he's putting across, as a positive message. I would say, actually, a rather strange dream, that it's all going to be fine, it's okay, I've given a beautiful speech, and I know financially I'm in control of this, and so don't worry about it. On one level, that's perfectly all right. But there does come a stage where people sit there and say, really, don't necessarily believe this. If we started saying that, no one will believe us, because they'll sit there and say, you don't have the track record of this. Would it affect us directly? The answer is yes, it would. If the world's largest economy goes into recession, the rest of the world feels it really quite quickly. Who's the first one to feel it? Well, actually the Chinese. Because the Chinese and the Americans are in a symbiotic relationship with one another. They can't do without each other. Who is China's largest trading partner? America. And in terms of America, who is the largest holder of American debt? China most of the time, sometimes Japan. So they need each other. They may bitch and moan at each other, but they can't do without each other. The result of that is everybody's in it together, so it's not in their interest to try and make it worse. So the countries have to come together and say, right, how do we handle a potential global recession and slowdown? Will there be a slowdown? Yes. Will there be a recession? Yes. It doesn't have to be a disaster. 2 quarters of shrinking economy is not necessarily a disaster. If you fall into a depression, that could be, but we know why that occurred, and there are things that can be done to try and manage that. But every single problem you have in terms of an economy going on, they're all slightly different. So the method of being able to manage it has to vary as well. But I have more confidence actually in the American central bankers in the experience that they've got, not just in terms of doing their job, but the depth of experience back over years, to say this is the action we need to take. And even though Trump won't necessarily understand it, there are actions or positions already in place to try and provide that level of support in terms of bank action, to make sure that certain banks, if they go bust, we can support it, in terms of the mortgage market, to make sure that can be supported, and to give confidence back to the primary driver of the US economy, Mr. and Mrs. Joe Schmo, living in Little Rock, Arkansas, shopping in Walmart, who may have a small house that may be a pile of twigs, but it's their main asset. And if their main asset goes down in value, That impacts on the American economy immediately, remember, which is 65% based on service and consumer economy, and that knocks on to the rest of the world. That's how that gets affected, but that is also how you resolve it. Get the schmoes to feel more confident, and you're going to be better off.
Would you trust Rachel Reeves to lead the UK economy through a recession?
Given what we've seen so far from the Chancellor, I would have no confidence at all. Why? I'm not being unfair to her in terms of her knowledge. I don't know what her knowledge is, although according to her CV, she seems to be slightly more enthusiastic than we actually think. But at the moment, she doesn't seem to understand which of the various ropes she should be pulling to try and actually get things moving. And she's had more than a year to try and show this. And you don't have to show yourself to be some fantastic magician to try and get this right. You don't actually have to show yourself, I don't know all the answers, but you surround yourself by the people who do, and put across the messages saying, these areas are wrong, this is what we're doing, and by the way, this is the progress we've already started making. That's how you build that confidence up. Now, it may well be, in fact, there are some positive messages around in the British economy, but they don't talk about that. Everything is then focused on, you can almost hear them in a huddle in number 11 Downing Street saying, everyone's attacking us, what do we have to try and do? Do we have to try and persuade the bond market we're all right? How do we actually make sure that the consumer's going to feel? And the result is, fascinating to see what we see in the budget. I fear it could be lots and lots of little very clever ideas, which unfortunately will normally unravel because the law of unintended consequences, and we go back to the old pasty tax, for example, as to the knock-on effect of that, and just basically how do you sell a sausage roll? Has you got VAT on it or not? And the whole thing loses the momentum, and the primary reason for having that budget is to show confidence in the finances for the country and for the investors.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.